I've been out of the country. I went to Vienna last week, and a very dear friend of mine passed away about 3 years ago. And because of the COVID restrictions, we weren't able to get everyone together to have a memorial service. So it just happened on the 20th. I mentioned my friend because he was maybe the main driving force in going forward with my project here, with our project here in Mongolia. The dream of putting together an international law institute where people could come from all over the world and express themselves freely in an objective and respectful setting. And we're still moving forward with this. It's been a lot more difficult than I thought it would be, and I have done huge amounts of research, which my research basically has explained to me why such a project as ours has been so difficult to get started. But my dear friend who passed, Dr. Jiri Toman, he was the author of UNESCO's manual handbook on the protection of cultural property in the event of armed conflict. And he was such a wonderful man. He was a man of course, very lively, wonderful intelligence and wit, and always charming and always polite. Such an old world prince, in the real true sense. And I'm really saying that in the best sense, in the truest sense of both the term old world and in the term prince. So that was my trip. We had the memorial service in this tiny little chapel in Krems, just on the periphery of the cemetery there. And Krems is a beautiful old little town that now has a university. And it was so good to connect with some old friends and make some wonderful new friends. And so that's where I've been. I'll go into more specifics on that trip and what it meant, and little by little, some things I need to work out how much to say and how much not to say. But let's move forward. I talked a few times. I'd mentioned this Nazi International, and I think people aren't quite clear on what that means. It's not the sort of garden variety Nazis we see at skinhead rallies around the world, and it's not the sort of hidden Nazi base in Antarctica or the ones who have infiltrated the US government. This is something much bigger, much more formidable, although I have to say I really don't know that much about the Nazi base in Antarctica, or what's down there. I don't know. There's some pretty hard evidence about it. A lot of it it's a little bit too much for me to take in or to make a pronouncement one way or the other. But let's just go with what we know. This is going back to 2004, so more recent, but some of this material goes back to the 70s, as you'll see here. The EIR, Executive Intelligence Review Record on the Nazi International, March 26, 2004. The following excerpts were compiled by counterintelligence editor Michelle Steinberg from both EIR and its monthly bulletin, Investigative Leads, directed to intelligence and law enforcement experts, which was published from 1979 to 1995. The Nazi-Soviet Alliance Behind International Terrorism by Lyndon LaRouche, Investigative Leads, February 25th, 1984. The editor's tracking of international terrorism began modestly during the summer of 1968 in a study of the social political profile and financial backing of the faction of SDS, which soon afterward became the Weatherman terrorists. The long apprenticeship in these and related matters of counterintelligence was transformed into professionalism during 1977-1978, as this writer was himself targeted for assassination by Germany's Baader-Meinhof RAF and U.S. terrorist groups during the summer of 1977. And as we cooperated with some leading circles in Italy during 1978 in an investigation of the Italian Red Brigade's kidnapping murder of former Italian Prime Minister Aldo Moro. We keep coming back to that, and I'm going to do a video on that exclusively sometime very soon, because it just keeps popping up, which will surprise some people. Won't be surprised by that at all, but nevertheless. During 1978 and 1979, we were the first to expose publicly the intimate interlinks between terrorism and the major drug-running and gun-running networks. Gradually, the laborious process of triangulation focused our attention in Switzerland, and then, more exactly, on the headquarters of the present-day Nazi International Organization of banker François Genot in Lausanne, Switzerland. And for those who are unclear about the significance of Switzerland, I made a video last month about Switzerland. Interesting stuff. None of it mine. I'm just reading it and commenting. But I'm learning too. You know, I'm not an expert. I'm just doing research and hoping to bring people along with me on this journey. Genot is an authentic hardcore Nazi. He was a prominent Nazi official in Switzerland during Adolf Hitler's reign in Germany, and emerged as a kind of general secretary for the reconstituted Nazi Malmö International when that was reassembled as a public association in Rome, Italy, at the close of the 1940s. Next entry here, Klaus Barbie, the Nazi International Organized Crime by Michelle Steinberg, EIR, March 1st, 1983. The February 5th, 1983 extradition of former Gestapo official Klaus Barbie from Bolivia to stand trial in France could become one of the most explosive political shakeups in post-war history. Ongoing investigations by Executive Intelligence Review have uncovered new evidence which points to a more than 30-year relationship between Barbie, the infamous Butcher of Lyon, who killed thousands of resistance fighters and Jews while heading the Gestapo unit in Lyon, France, and some of America's leading, quote, citizens above suspicion, unquote. These include Henry Kissinger, General Julius Klein, the leader of the U.S. occupation forces, former OSS station chief, and later CIA Director Alan Dulles, U.S. High Commissioner for Germany John J. McCloy, Kissinger mentor Fritz Kramer, and the late Frank Wisner, former head of the State Department's official of policy coordination. The investigator must not stop with Barbie's alleged recruitment to U.S. intelligence agencies and escape from Europe in 1948. According to documented information, Klaus Barbie has been at the center of the Neo-Nazi International since the end of the war, the Neo-Nazi International that is run out of Lausanne, Switzerland, by banker and former SS officer François Genot, a funder of left and right-wing terrorists in Europe today. Next entry, quote, "Secret report shows former Bolivian government ran narcotics traffic." Oh, that's the title. Investigative leads, June 5th, 1983. On April 26, 1983, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Miami, Florida, indicted Luis Arce Gomez, the former Interior Minister of Bolivia, on charges of conspiracy to export and distribute hundreds of pounds of cocaine to the United States. The Interior Ministry office, headed by Arce Gomez, was a sanctuary for Latin American operatives of the Propaganda Due Freemasonic Lodge and of the Nazi International. The connections include the following. Cocaine traffickers including Pierluigi Pagliai and Stefano Delle Chiaie, both members of the Italian fascist group Ordine Nuovo, New Order, and wanted for the bombing of the Bologna, Italy train station in 1980, where 86 people were killed. There's another one I've got to research and probably make an independent video. Pagliai was shot while being captured by Bolivian police in October 1982 and extradited to Italy, where he later died. Stefano Delle Chiaie, who was sought in the same operation in which Pagliai was captured, worked directly for Klaus Barbie in a special unit of Arce Gomez's Interior Ministry. Delle Chiaie was identified in confessions by Elio Ciolini, a member of the Propaganda Due Lodge, as one of the key operatives in the Bologna bombing, which Ciolini said was planned at a secret meeting of the P2, quote, executive group called the Monte Carlo Committee in April 1980. Ciolini also testified that Henry Kissinger, the former U.S. Secretary of State, was a member of that elite Monte Carlo Committee. Klaus Barbie, the Nazi war criminal who is now standing trial in France, was a special operative for Arce Gomez's Interior Ministry. The April 26, 1983 U.S. indictment of Arce Gomez is thus a first step forward towards stopping the operations of the Bolivian P2 operatives who were responsible for the 1980, quote, cocaine coup in that country. These charges, however, are far too narrow in scope. François Genot, terrorist controller, next item, investigative leads, February 25th, 1984. The key lead in establishing the continuity of the Nazi apparatus before, during, and after the war is not only the Anglo-American protection operation, but the British intelligence-run European Center for the Study of Fascism, directed by Strachey Barnes. Based in Lausanne, the home of Genot, Barnes's operation served as a mediation point for Prime Minister Winston Churchill, Mussolini, and leading German Nazis. Immediately after the war, Barnes turned over the operation to a close friend of Genot, Gaston Armand Guy Amadrouz. During the 1940s, Amadrouz established the Courrier du Continent and the New European Order organizations. In 1946, Amadrouz took over the European Center for the Study of Fascism. In setting up the New European Order organization, the Universal Fascists, quote unquote, created an intelligence operation under the protection of the Anglo-American intelligence agencies. Not surprising, right? It's like the Anglo-Americans are good at providing security and organizing logistics. But the core, the power, at the core of it, we're looking at Switzerland, we're looking at Venice. Working with Amadrouz was a Nazi youth leader, Gunther Schwab, whose book, Dance with the Devil, created the core ideology base by which today's new fascist party, the Green Party of West Germany, was formed. Establishing the international networks became the work of the Amadrouz-run Malmö International. In 1950, at the first meeting in Rome, all the old luminaries of the war gathered together the preparations for a new fascist order. In attendance were Sir Oswald Mosley, who was being financed by a Venetian-based foundation, according to U.S. Army counterintelligence records. Count Loredan, I guess it's Italian, a Venetian nobleman who organized the Italian Socialist Movement, MSI, as well as leading former Nazis and SS officers. In 1951, the second meeting of the Nazi International was held in Malmö, Sweden. Officially, the Malmö International was dissolved in 1956. However, the international infrastructure is maintained through covert networks. The present profile of the Nazi International is understood through the network of publications and institutions, which is again propagandizing the racial purity line. The Mankind Quarterly, run by Scottish Rite and British intelligence operative Sir Robert Geyer, Armin Moeller of the Siemens Foundation, the École Nouvelle of Alain Benoit, pardon my French, and Thies Christofferson's Gesellschaft für Biologische Anthropologie. As part of the renewed campaign to reorganize the old Nazi apparatus, Junot's 1982 publication of the Political Testament of Hitler was to be followed by the Last Political Notes of Martin Bormann. François Junot's publishing rights to Hitler's Last Political Testament were arranged through the help of Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels' wife, a close friend of Junot. Operationally, this neo-Nazi apparatus functions through Scottish Rite Freemasonic lodges. In Italy, Propaganda Due, Monaco, Monte Carlo Lodge, Geneva, Alpina Lodge, and London, the United Mother Grand Lodge run by the Duke of Kent. One of the top law firms of the Nazi apparatus, Ponce, Turrettini, Amadrouz, and Neyrod, is based in Geneva. The Amadrouz in question is Gaston Guy Amadrouz, and the firm is utilized by François Junot in handling many of his publishing lawsuits. Otto Skorzeny's key role In terms of the Anglo-American intelligence services, the key protected asset of British intelligence and its junior partner, the OSS-CIA, was SS Colonel Otto Skorzeny, head of all special paramilitary operations for Hitler. Skorzeny married the niece of Hjalmar Schacht. She is now one of the closest of Junot's associates. Skorzeny, in all likelihood, was a British agent of influence through most of the war and brought Abwehr and SS officers into the Anglo-American camp after the war. According to one source, he had extensive holdings of land in Ireland and Spain, which were protected by the British as a hedge against future collaboration with Skorzeny after the war. Skorzeny not only saved Mussolini's life, but was probably responsible for preventing the partisans in Italy from seizing the secret papers of Mussolini and his correspondence with Churchill. Skorzeny was close to the number 2 man at the Abwehr, Lahausen Vehment, and was able to bring this grouping into post-war Anglo-American operations. Skorzeny's Middle East apparatus, protected by Alan Dulles, intersected 3 areas. 1, King Farouk's Egypt. 2, the King of Libya, a Senussi. And 3, the Khalil family of Kuwait. According to a former U.S. intelligence officer, Skorzeny's ties into the Khalil family enabled him to finance many of the projects for the Middle East. One of Skorzeny's deputies, an operative named Vermut, also an engineer by training, set up many of the banking logistical operations around which François Junot later turned up. Using his Madrid-based company ADSAP, Skorzeny established smuggling, arms, and drug operations in Vienna and Paris. The key neo-Nazi smuggling operations to finance destabilizations are handled by an Austrian neo-Nazi named Horst Grillmeier, by Stefano Delle Chiaie, the mastermind of the P2 Lodge's bloody 1980 Bologna train station bombing, by Klaus Barbie's Bolivian connection, and by Klaus Fiebelkorn, who was recently arrested in West Germany. These also intersect the neo-Nazi Turkish Grey Wolves organization, which deployed would-be papal assassin Mehmet Ali Aksa. The career of the Nazi Amt, the 6th Walter Schellenberg, raises the question. I should have said Sechster, I guess. How were most of the SS, Gestapo, and Abwehr networks turned over to the Anglo-Americans? Schellenberg, according to a recent book on the subject by William Stevenson, was absorbed into a British Secret Service network and spent 5 post-war years in what had been a lunatic asylum outside London. This asylum provided the perfect cover for long-term interrogation of men like Schellenberg. Schellenberg, who had taken over Nazi Heydrich's position after the latter's assassination during the war, was Abwehr director over Admiral Wilhelm Canaris and in charge of the Gehlen organization. It is not well known that after the war, Reinhard Gehlen and his circle confiscated Schellenberg's file system with an international list of all informants, agents, etc. A reconciliation between Schellenberg and Gehlen occurred in 1950 at a meeting in Madrid where Scorzeni opened his office and received both men. It is through the ideological and operational centers of the Nazi International that both left-wing and right-wing assassination and terrorist operations come together, with an overlap of the Abwehr and the Trotskyite Fourth International. Let me read that again. It is through the ideological and operational centers of the Nazi International that both left-wing and right-wing assassination and terrorist operations come together, with an overlap of the Abwehr SS and Trotskyite Fourth International. In France, the Nouvelle Droite of Le Pen; in Germany, the neo-Nazis; in Spain, Fuerza Nueva; in Britain, Column 88, are all basically under control of the League of St. George, based in Britain, which also controls the Régie de Bray Fourth International via Michel Pablo. Next item, London role exposed in Italian terrorism by Claudio Celani, EIR, January 12th, 2001. A failed bombing attempt against a newspaper in Rome has brought to the limelight the role of London in fostering international terrorism, confirming what EIR has often written. Now, Italian researchers and the Parliament are demanding an investigation to find out whether a neo-fascist organization called Forza Nuova has enjoyed protection by Her Majesty's intelligence services, and whether there could be a political strategy behind the escalating pattern of terrorist activities over the last year in Italy. On December 22nd, Andrea Insabato, a psychologically unstable radical right-winger, was severely injured by a crude bomb which exploded at his feet in the central office of the Rome daily Il Manifesto. Although Insabato, who survived his severe injuries, and his lawyers keep insisting that he was there only by chance, the police have no doubt that he was himself the perpetrator. Insabato is an old acquaintance of the police. In the early 1980s, he spent 3 years in jail in the aftermath of the famous Bologna train station bombing, in which 86 people died. Insabato was a member of a neo-fascist organization called Terza Posizione, whose leaders Roberto Fiore and Massimo Morsello were supposed to end up in jail as well, but instead escaped to London, where they enjoyed protection from Italian justice. All Italian requests for the extradition of Fiore and Morsello were systematically turned down by the British Foreign Office until the statute of limitations ran out, and after almost 20 years, the two were able to go back to Italy. All right, this is very interesting to me as a half Mexican-American. The PAN's Nazi synarchist roots, EIR, June 10th, 1985. EIR here prints for the first time a startling document from the files of the U.S. State Department of the 1940s, revealing full knowledge of the Nazi anti-American nature of the PAN, National Action Party of Mexico, from its inception in 1939. The following extraordinary excerpts are from an October 31st, 1941 confidential intelligence report submitted to the State Department by the Assistant Naval Attaché at the U.S. Embassy in Mexico City. The Sinarquista movement. The Unión Nacional Sinarquista is a totalitarian movement based upon both Nazi and fascist ideas and plans, and directed by Nazi agents through an intricate Spanish phalange Church of Mexico organization. Most of its membership is made up of middle to lower class Mexicans who are devout Catholics, but among its large and petty chiefs can be found many Spaniards of the right, Phalangists. The Unión Nacional Sinarquista came into being on May 27, 1937, in the city of León, state of Guanajuato, when two active Phalangists, José and Salvador Trueba Olivares, appeared before a notary. LIC, is that a licensed? I'm not sure what that means. I should have done my homework on that. Manuel Villaseñor, and registered a constitution for the Unión. The witnesses were German engineer Helmut Oskar Schreiter, Adolfo Maldonado, and Melchor Ortega, state officials, and here we have the LIC again, Isaac Guzman Valdivia. According to the known facts about the Union's constitution, the movement seeks to 1. Create an authoritative state in Mexico. 2. Save Mexico from itself and foreigners, quote unquote. 3. Subordinate private interests to that of the state. 4. Wage war against communism and leftist labor unions. 5. Establish, quote, full Mexican nationalism free from foreign tutelage. 6. Eliminate foreign symbols and propaganda. 7. Unite labor, capital, and government for greater production. 8. Eliminate all class struggle and establish one political party. 9. Permit private ownership of property and profit from private enterprise, but, quote, adjusted to the needs of the community and state. Schreiter, the German engineer who is said to have been looking around for fertile propaganda ground, reported to Berlin that the Trueba Olivares family was hotly pro-German and pro-Italian and anti-American. So he was ordered to back the group financially and lead it on a new path. This he did, arranging for the Union's founding and its constitution, and appearing in person to have it legally established as a group. With the German backing as an impetus, the Union, what is this? Oh, yeah. The Union got going quickly. In 1938, it organized a secret military group within the Union to drill members and teach them to use arms in a Nazi military fashion. It is today a powerful group, but how well armed the members are cannot definitely be established. Members claim 150,000 rifles and from 2,000 to 3,000 machine guns. One of the most dangerous factors is that in the Mexican army itself, several of these Union military groups are reliably reported to exist. Just as we're reading this, I'm thinking about the kind of rhetoric that's coming out of Mexico today, Mexico City today. It really echoes this, doesn't it? I wonder if there's renewed activity in these old cells. The Union uses the communist Nazi cell idea. Crack organizers, mostly Mexicans, are constantly on the job, working through the priests, from whom they get names of good candidates. Small cell groups are formed, interlocking in the same town. Certain members of these town cells are linked with cells in other parts of the area. The cells are built up to a certain level, and no Mexican member knows more than a few order-giving leaders. Propaganda of a virulent totalitarian character with nationalist and anti-gringo icing is directed at the middle and lower classes. The Union, as ordered by the Phalange, wants to use Mexico as the nearest center of espionage against the United States. Very interesting. It seeks to organize efficient cells expressly for sabotage in Mexico and the U.S. It wants to build up Mexico as a convenient munitions center for totalitarian revolts whenever the United States might get involved in a war. Mexicans are told that their country, under sinarquismo, will be the great nation of the Northern Hemisphere. The United States is doomed, say the organizers, and members are told that as soon as the United States gets into the war, the American nation will crack open due to isolationist antagonism, and Mexico, under Union dominance, will take over vast sections of the United States, such as the Pacific Coast, the Southwest, and Central South. Acción Nacional. No investigation of the Sinarquistas would be complete without due importance being given to a smaller but powerful group in Mexico called the Acción Nacional. This is a group made up chiefly of business and professional men who are close to the church, who are interlinked with the Sinarquistas through the Falange, and who hope to blossom out as the big men of any totalitarian government. The Falange is said to get its principal secret support from the Acción, using the Sinarquistas to bring in the faithful in the lower classes. Outwardly, it is giving the impression of striking a lone pose as the coming Save Mexico group, but the Sinarquistas are unduly friendly to the Acción. As one Sinarquista leader told a reliable source, quote, "We shall be the soldiers of the coming struggle, and the Acción Nacional will supply the officers," unquote. While the Acción seems to be on a different level from Sinarquismo, actually it is believed to be an integral part of the real Nazi Falange program for the Mexican totalitarian state, and any difference in levels would be ironed out when the emergency arose.